Hey everyone, welcome back to Tourist Tabac Book Club. I'm your host Andrew, and I'm joined by my co-host Jash.
Why, hello there.
Hello. We are covering The Wind Through the Keyhole by Stephen King. That is book 4.5 in the Dark Tower series. Just as a reminder, this book was written after the original series. It's a kind of a filler book in between book 4 and 5, hence it being 4.5. Before we get into it, though, we did want to just mention something we didn't mention in the previous video covering the first part of this book. Excuse me.
Yeah, so in part one of the Skin Man, there was a part where they describe what the monster looks like, and after reviewing it, we didn't really go into much detail about that, so I just kind of wanted to talk about it real quick. So, it's described as having long jaws, taller than a man, scales instead of skin, a long tail dragging behind it, yellow eyes, slitted dark pupils that glowed, and it has a flat head, and the mouth is filled with teeth longer than a man's hand and stubby legs. So
Yeah, pretty pretty terrifying.
yeah, pretty terrifying. It kind of just reminds me of. It doesn't say it has horns or anything, but I'm kind of just picturing a like little demon without horns that's kind of like a mixture of like a crocodile. So it's like a demon croc,
Yeah.
crocodile, something like that.
Crocodile, I like it.
hmm So yeah, that's really it of the Skin Man. Is like of what I wanted to get into is just talk like briefly about the description.
Yeah, no, we didn't get into it in the last part, so we just kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit. But now we are talking about, I guess, what you would consider the next part of this book, which is, it's going to be a little confusing here. This part is called The Wind Through the Keyhole, but it's also the title of the book, right? The Wind Through the Keyhole.
Yep.
So this is also the story that Roland is telling to the young boy in the jail cell, and it's called The Wind Through the Keyhole. So we got like three usages of the same name, but I'm just going to preface everything here with just something I want to talk about before we get into this next part. It's very unexpected, right? So it's in the same world as Roland, kind of. Like there's certain things that are in the same world, but it's a completely different story that just comes out of left field with different characters and everything. And I almost felt like this entire section was just a huge flex from Stephen King, where it's just like he can just spin up a story out of his ass. He literally named his characters Tim, Nell, Big Ross, bro, Big Kels.
Big
Just,
fucking kill.
yeah, just these stupid ass names. Just made them up and still made it like a super captivating story. I loved this story. It was
Right?
insane.
Like
But yeah,
you could have just took this Went Through the Keyhole story, took it out of this book, and like put it on like a Stephen King short story, and it would still like slap.
yeah.
Yeah,
It
like
was really good.
it doesn't need this book at all. But this book, as the Dark Tower series has gone thus far, it's been pretty good. So it was crazy. And then just like the Went Through the Keyhole section of this book has like, so like you said, it's like within the realm. So I think it's, they like say it as like a what do you call it? Kind of like how Cinderella is, like the Once Upon a Time, like Snow White type thing, and
Yeah,
they
exactly.
do this, but so like in Cinderella and like Snow White, Once Upon a Time, it's still like in our reality ish, except yeah, so it's still like within our reality that we could think of. So this for this story is the same thing, but in Roland's world. But there's a lot of hints showing that this story actually happened. Probably, maybe not like event for event. Like maybe everything didn't exactly happen the way it's told, but there are a lot of clues that indicate that this is in fact based on a true story within Midworld's time.
Yes, definitely. It's definitely set in Midworld, and you can see how it's a real story within it.
And then when we get to those parts that at least I noticed that relate back to the main story, I'll bring those up as we go along.
Cool. Well, I'll get into it here, just recounting some of the main events of the story, but I just wanted to bring up that first part where I'm not trying to suck Stephen King off as much as I'm sure he would enjoy that, but I just wanted to say it just felt like a huge flex. It's like he just takes this random story out of nowhere and just, it almost feels like he just made this story up as he went. And it was captivating. Right? It's crazy though. Right? I was like, man.
That was good.
I thought this story would be more about obviously we're gonna get back into the Skin Man in the next section, but yeah, I'll just get into this story.
I almost just want to see more of Tim.
I know, right?
To be honest,
me too.
I want another story with him.
I don't even care as much about the Skin Man now.
Yeah, right.
Kind of want to see where Tim goes. You can make your own series out of Tim's life. You could just make another series. It's insane.
Maybe one day.
Yeah. But yeah, I'll get into it here. So I'll just start kind of talking about the main points. Of course, Josh, as always, if you want to intervene, just stop me whenever.
Cool, will do.
So yeah, like we talked about, if you've read this, which we assume you have read this if you're listening to this, but I'll just kind of go over again the main characters. You have the boy Tim, his mom Nell, and then his dad's name is Big Ross. And then his friend's fucking name is Big Kels. And I'm pretty sure the teacher's name, who wears a veil, is named Smack. I think her name is Smack or something like that. I'll just call her the teacher if I'm getting that wrong. But there's also the teacher who wears a veil because her face is messed up from a disease. But I'm just going to... Those are the main characters. So it starts with Big Ross, again the dad, and his friend Big Kels. Go into the woods to cut ironwood. So ironwood is a valuable resource for this small village town. It's called Tree, the village. After they go ahead.
So they live in a town called Tree, and they cut ironwood. So
they cut ironwood.
Is ironwood? So okay, is it an actual tree or is it steel beams?
Oh man, I don't know. Isn't it real? Isn't it trees? Isn't it just strong material trees or whatever?
It's I always thought it could be trees, but then on the other hand, there's other things where I'm what if? What if it's just the fucking. I'm my brain is just not working. It's the ruins, of an old city and stuff past in Midworld that's very small, smaller now, but still big enough to be considered a forest, and all that's left is just buildings and steel, and the steel beams of all the buildings are all that's left just sticking out of the ground, but all the rest of the material is destroyed.
Oh, okay.
But they have an axe, so you can't really cut metal with axe.
I would assume it'd have to be wood, if they're cutting it with an axe. Otherwise, they're fucking sawzalling that or something.
Sawzall, let's go.
Sawzall. Shout out to senior year of residential carpentry.
Oh, yeah. I use a sawzall at work.
There you go. That's one of the most fun tools. Okay, I'm gonna move on here, but
yeah, you can.
But the sawzall's sick. So they cut the ironwood, and so Big Ross and Big Kels, they go out on an excursion to cut ironwood. That's the main source of income for everybody in this town, right? So only Big Kels comes back. Big Ross is supposedly dead, and Big Kels only has one word to say about this, and he says dragon. Okay, so you get introduced to dragons that they might be within this forest. They do talk a lot about the forest. I'm not going to go super deep into it. Essentially, the forest is really dangerous, right? And to go get ironwood, you have to be a grown man and have a partner or several partners, and you need to know where you're going. Otherwise, you could easily die. So the forest is basically just really dangerous. So Big Kels comes home. Big Ross is dead. Obviously, Tim and his mom are devastated. They also don't have a lot of money, right? So the only real source of income in this town is ironwood, and they're not going to be able to pay their taxes. If you can't pay your taxes in this world, then you get kicked out of your house. So they have about 8 weeks to get the money.
Mm-hmm.
So the story begins where you start to see, Big Kel's kind of becoming the antagonist here, obviously, when he approaches Tim's mom, Nell, and is like, hey, do you want to get married now that Big Ross is dead? There's a lot of backstory on there being a love triangle. There used to be a love triangle between Big Kels, Big I'm just going to call him Ross and Kels.
Yeah,
Ross, Kels. Yeah, Nell.
The big boy.
He proposes, I can sell my house, and then we can both live in your house, and that way you all can pay your taxes and I can pay mine. She's kind of hesitant to do this because Kels is revealed to be kind of an angry drunk. So it's kind of a difficult situation. Nell, the mom, talks to Tim, the boy, and is like, hey, how do you feel about this, me marrying Kels? We don't really have much of a choice. And Tim is like, I don't know if you should do that. He's kind of a piece of shit. But she eventually agrees to do it anyway, and they get married.
So I got a few things I want to discuss real quick. So when Big Kells shows up after the dragon and proposes to her after like the quick backstory of the love triangle, my first thought was, yeah, he fucking killed him. It was pretty obvious.
Definitely insinuated for sure. Definitely.
Yeah. So all right, that's what I was asking if you caught that.
No, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, it was pretty obvious. But and then like the other part where like the mom's hesitant and she asks Tim what he thinks about it, because like right now she's trying to she's in a tough spot. She's like, okay, we need money. If we don't get money, we're gonna be living on the streets. Kells is giving me an opportunity to get money so that me and my boy can survive. But there's like two problems, or a couple of problems with this. For one, she doesn't love Kells. Obviously, she loves Ross. Ross is dead. She's obviously gonna love her son's safety and love her son more than Kells. And Kells, has the reputation of being the angry drunk and all that. And three is when Tim brings it up. He's like, when his mom's like, what would you feel if I got remarried to Kells? And Tim's like, I thought when you marry forever, no matter what. So it's like, because she married, very old timey way of looking at it. It's like since she married Ross, even though he's dead, like that's it. Like, so it goes into more of their lore, I guess, or how they live. But I know it's like a story within a story within a story. So, but it also, like, if this story was made in Midworld, then it reflects the values of Midworld held. And so it's an interesting story about breaking like an oath like this, like a marriage oath, to provide for your child. And it's like it's a tough circumstance, and you can see that the mom is like trying to convince herself to do it. She already knows she's gonna do it. She's just trying to find excuses to make the decision easier. And that's what I got out of it. I don't know if I looked in too deep or whatnot, but hey, what did you think about it?
Yeah, I agree with a lot with what you said there. You definitely sympathize with Nell being a single mother and being, like you said, in a really traditional setting where, not only is Tim saying, oh, you married Ross, like you shouldn't marry again, but also it's just like she can't really work. There isn't really opportunities for women to get a job and pay for it themselves. They have to rely on a man. So it puts her in a really difficult situation, and I'm sure the two people who are listening to this, or anybody who would read this story, can definitely think of a time where, a mom or a dad, whoever, is put in situations like this that are really difficult, and like you said, she already knows she's going to have to do it in order to provide for Tim. She doesn't want Tim to be homeless, but she knows it's going to be bad, and he's going to probably be abusive, right? So it's like, it just gets worse.
Yeah.
Obviously. But.
And kids are more honest than like anyone else on this planet. So you have like 11-year-old kid who's just like, I don't think it's a good idea, and the mom's like, oh, well, like she knows it's not a good idea, but she's not given a choice.
Yeah, she doesn't really have any other option. It's either marry this guy or be homeless. So.
Exactly.
Yeah. But do you have anything else?
No, I was about to say you can carry on.
All right. So yeah, like we talked about, she still marries him anyway. It does make a point within the story. Stephen King makes a point to say that almost none of the woodsmen show up. The other woodsmen in the town, just showing that he's not well liked. And then several of the bridesmaids look at Nell and they're sad for her. So literally the wedding night, Kels hits her already. So night one, he hits her, and Tim actually hears it, and he hears Kels like telling her to shut up, and then Tim goes to sleep. So it's already beginning. But yeah, go ahead.
So this is when I got like, so at first I was like, oh, okay, Stephen King's writing this, and it's pretty tame, it's good. And then the father dies, and I'm like, oh, well, okay, that's pretty typical.
Yeah, pretty typical, like
yeah,
story.
Like it's not too bad. And then it just out of nowhere gets to, oh, I'm 11-year-old. I hear my mom having sex with this guy, but I don't know what that means. Like I don't know what that is. I just hear a lot of rocking, and then a big smack, and then but it's like we know what's going on, and it's just like. I'm just like, it makes us hate Kells even more. Like, obviously, and I'm just like, damn, now I don't know how he fucking does it. I don't know how Stephen King does it, but he makes me care for, like, all these fucking characters that aren't real, but then, like, it hits me in the feels, and I'm just like, God, Tim, I hope you fucking kill this prick.
I know, right? We literally have only known Tim for, like, 2 seconds, and we're already like, yo, Tim, I'm so sorry. Fuck this guy.
Yeah. It really goes to show Stephen King really does have a good like his writing talent is just insane. I guess there's a reason why he's one of the best modern writers of all time.
Well, and it's funny how you describe like, oh, this is pretty tame so far, and this is when it took the Stephen King turn. It's like, oh, here we go. Like, strap yourself in for the roller coaster, baby.
I'm like, this is just another traditional grim story, the old timey stories, and out of nowhere, it's like, bitch.
It's like, here we go with the child trauma. The first checkbox has been checked for child trauma. Next, we need, gore.
First, we got the throbbing piston. We got family issues, and then we got traumatized child.
Yep.
So, I mean, all the check marks are being, that's what Stephen King. Yep, that's Stephen King. All right.
He's got a checklist, and he checks it twice. So.
Damn. Some cold storage. All right. we can.
All right. So there's a lot more, and I'm going to go through this fairly fast just to try to keep this episode short. But there is a lot of detail, more than what I'm going to describe about the family dynamic, basically, and like what happens and the details. So, Josh, if you want to stop me and talk about any of that, just feel free to. But I'm going to go ahead and just hit the main stuff. So.
Cool.
Again, he hits her on the wedding night, already being abusive. There's another scene where Kels and Tim actually bring a large leather trunk out of Kels's house, because again, Kels is going to sell his house, and they're all going to live in Nell's house, and that way they can pay the taxes. Kels clearly cares about this trunk a lot. In fact, to a degree, a Stephen King level of obsession, I would say, where he like strokes it and just is very weird with it, like almost sexual with it to a certain extent.
He sits on it every day, every night while he
Yes.
smokes his pipe.
Yes. And he talks to it. So clearly it matters a lot to him. I'm going to fast forward a little bit here, but yeah, if there's anything you want to mention, just let me know. But the tax collector comes to Tim's house eventually. Again, we have to pay the tax man in order for us to not be homeless. So after giving the payment to the tax man, he actually pulls Tim onto his horse. This guy is really creepy, right? So he's described as having like the longest face ever or whatever. The way Stephen King voices him in the audiobook is kind of hilarious.
Yeah, this is where I'm going to stop you real quick.
Go ahead.
So it's fairly obvious to anyone, I'd say. But so this tax collector is the Dark Man.
Yes, right.
Obviously, yeah. He's Randall Flagg. He's the tall man, and this is one of the first like the first time we were reading this, I'm like, there's similarities at this point with the Dark Man and this tax collector, like the long face, like the way he's acting, kind of creepy, very very manipulative and very kind of like gamey, to where he's like, here's this key, you do these things while I watch for my entertainment. Like, he's just kind of an asshole. But like, but you don't like think for real that this is like the Dark Man. You think this is just Stephen King representing him. But then there's stuff down the line that confirms that I believe that this story is actually happened within this universe. But you can continue on from there. But
yeah.
He's the Dark Man.
The tall man. Martin Broadcloak.
Walter.
Randall Flagg.
Randall fucking Flagg.
Randy.
Randall. Fucking Randy.
Alright, so yeah, the tax man comes, he gets the money. It's a lot of money. It's almost all their money that they have to give to this tax man. And then Tim is pulled onto his horse, and then he has a private conversation with just Tim. And he gives Tim a magic key that can only be used once, but it can open anything. So he then tells Tim, hey, I'm going to be camping in the scary forest. Feel free to come visit me in the scary ass forest if you like.
Yeah. Another red flag.
Another red flag. Gave him a key. Yeah, I mean, obviously he's a bad person, but so he returns Tim to his family, and then after that we have another abusive moment where Kels basically demands to know what the tax man said, and Tim doesn't give a good enough answer, and he ends up hitting Tim's mom and hitting Tim pretty bad. So the abuse is starting to like ratchet up, and it only gets worse. But the next scene is Tim using the key. So he goes to the leather trunk that Kel sits on all the time that he strokes, and he opens it with the magic key. So he finds his dad's lucky coin. He takes this, and then he leaves everything else in the trunk. And then after he finds this coin, he suspects that, Kels killed Big Ross, which has been insinuated this entire story that Big Kels killed Big Ross. So he's like, all right, I need to confirm for my sake that Kels killed Ross, my dad. So he's going to go to the tax man basically to confirm that. Now, the caveat being here that when he used the magic key, he was able to open the trunk, but he was not able to lock it because it is a one-use item. And of course, we know that Randall Flagg loves to play these games with people. So now, whenever Kels gets home and finds that his trunk has been opened, he's going to blame someone and probably, be abusive.
Yeah.
But then he goes and visits the tax man, the covenant man, the tall man.
That's all.
And then it gets really Stephen King. It starts to get really messed up. But the tax man pours water into like a basin, and he shows him a vision, and it's basically just Kels accusing his mom Nell of opening the trunk when obviously the mom didn't, and he just absolutely annihilates her. Like, he just beats her to the point of almost death. And Tim is just seeing this in real time, and he can't really do anything about it. So the Covenant Man is kind of just torturing him. After this vision, They pour the water out of the basin, and then he sees his dad floating in the water. So it's confirmed that he's dead. And then the tax man confirms that Kels killed his dad. So, like, it's just the most absolutely traumatizing experience.
Because, like, not only did he have to work up the courage to go super deep into this forest, and it's already making the forest sound creepy. Like, even, like, the pony he's riding, or donkey, or whatever it was, a mule, same thing, was just like, he's like, if I wasn't the one controlling or telling this mule or whatever where to go, they would have ran off already. And he's like whispering it to it. It's like, you'll be safe, just stick with me. And then Tim's just like, oh, I have no idea how I'd keep her safe. She'd probably die. I'm probably gonna die. So, but then working the courage to actually like get through that forest, pretty remarkable for 11-year-old. So he gets to the tax man. The tax man's making him do all this weird shit, and he doesn't know why until he sees his father, because the tax man said that there was, like, the wise women or something said that only a pure soul would not be like eaten by the bugs or like anything like that. So he first has Tim go fetch water from the nasty puddle with all the bugs eating each other and going ape shit. Then he has him go to the second one, and Tim's almost like, oh, I gotta get back to my mom, I gotta do this. And he's like, you do as I tell you, boy. You go over to that puddle. And so he goes over there and he sees his dad, and at that point I'm just like, oh my god, Stephen King. What the fuck? But then, his body, his eyes are open. He's not even eaten. His body's stayed intact due to the water, and nothing, because his dad was so pure, the bugs and stuff, no one ate him, which is great. Like, honestly, it's just kind of very interesting visual storytelling there as well. As like it's like, oh, his dad's so pure, what a good daddy, that that didn't happen, like the bugs wouldn't eat him. Then on the other hand, Tim's 11 seeing his dead dad in a puddle or whatever. And then on the other hand, we got like some lore, some magic, or some, maybe not magic, but maybe like some sort of worldly, like, divine law of purity and how the world reacts to it by not, like, absolutely eating and destroying this body of a pure person.
Yeah, definitely. And it makes you hate Kels even more, because it's like, this guy was his dad was obviously like a great person.
Like, yeah. And then what else did the taxman gave? Did he give the stick to Tim, or like the metal rod?
Yeah, that happens a little later, but in this scene, he does give him his dad's axe, because the taxman actually found Big Ross's body when he was investigating the story of a dragon. He knew there probably wasn't a dragon in the area, but he wanted to go check it out, and then he found Big Ross's body. And he found the axe. So he gives it to Tim, and obviously Tim is like, alright, I'm going to kill Kels with it.
Yeah, he was pissed.
Yeah. So, anything else before I kind of keep going?
I guess we kind of got through the gist. I'm kind of having you just go ham with the story, because we've all read it, so we're just getting through it to discuss it.
Yeah, definitely. The next part is obviously goes back to his house, and the teacher is there, the veiled teacher. His mom is blind now from the beating, so it just gets worse. Tim and the teacher, they kind of stand watch to make sure Kels doesn't come back. He doesn't come back, and then Tim is like telling the other men in the town, like, hey, this guy almost killed my mom. Let's get him. And then the other men are like, yeah, let's get him, and they send out search parties, but they aren't able to find him, basically. And then
I really liked this part, because normally, like, all the movies or whatever, it's like you'd see the kids going around saying some wacko stuff, and none of the adults believe him. And in this case, they're like, "You sure?" And he's like, "Yes, I saw him with my own eyes, and here's the axe." And then they're like, "All right, cool. Let's round up. Let's." And it continues the plot forward, and it doesn't just stay still. Like, well, we don't believe him, and then they got to find a way to believe it. I'm like, just so glad we didn't have to reuse that trope a million in the
Seriously,
story.
and I feel like it's also the first like win that Tim has, because this entire series, Tim and his mom are just absolutely getting L after L.
Yeah, I mean, you
Just being
gotta.
destroyed like constantly. So like when he went to the other guys to be like, "Hey, we need to go find Kelsey and like kill him," and the other guys were like, I was so hoping they would be like, "Yeah, let's do it," because he just needs like some kind of win. It's just if they told him no, we're not gonna look, I would have been like, man, this guy gets no nothing. So
Yeah, it's good to because like if Tim didn't at least get one win, every now and again, then it would just get repetitive to where just the story would just get way too sad, and it's just like, come
yeah,
on, like at least now we get like that little boost of hope because like our hope, like we just start getting sad and sad and sad, and then at the point with the tax man, it gets real sad, and then now
yeah.
with the townspeople are like, yeah, we're gonna help you, fuck cows, and then they're just like, let's go.
Let's
So
go, town.
get that hope back.
Let's go, council. Congress finally doing something. We're gonna find Kels.
Dude, right? We're gonna find Kelson. He's the only one who's gonna pay taxes.
And
Thank
then
God.
we're gonna immediately release him from prison.
Yeah. They didn't even arrest him.
Yeah, no, they didn't even find him, but so after that is, yeah, like you said, he finds the steel wand in the basin, and then he sees two more visions, right? He sees a vision of the Covenant Man, our favorite tax man, and a fairy, and then he sees a vision of his mother and Merlin. And then he goes to the teacher who's watching over his mom. He's like, "Hey, I'm going to go into the forest and find a cure for my mom's sight based off these visions." And the teacher is like, "Do not listen to the tax man. He left that for you purposely to mess with you more. Like, do not go in the forest." And he, is like, "Nah, I'm still going to go in the forest." So the teacher gives him a lantern and then a gun. So now he has a gun.
Yeah, let's go. So like, out of this scene when he talks to his mom who's been blind, and then the teacher, they both gave examples about how like the tax collector hasn't seemed to age at all,
Right.
since even they were kids. So that adds a bit of unworldliness to him, and then when the teacher pulled out, she's like, "I don't know why my brother carried this thing around and all this stuff. I don't even know how to use it really." And she gives Tim a pistol, and I'm just like, hell yeah! I'm like, is this an origin story of the first gunslinger?
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought this was turning into when she gave him the gun. I was like, there's got to be a time where he's going to be called a gunslinger, which it happens later. But yeah,
Yeah. So like, I thought so. I honestly thought this was just like a myth legend story about the first gunslinger,
yeah,
but it's obviously not. So
yeah.
he's not the first gunslinger. Gunslingers already exist
It's still a
at
fun
this
story.
point. Hmm.
So yeah, he gets the gun, gets the lantern. He goes down the Ironwood Trail, which is where they go to get to Ironwood, because it's called the Ironwood Trail.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you hopefully you could interpret that. So he's on the trail, and then the fairy from his vision appears, and she leads him into the great swamp. I think it's called Fang. It kind of sounds like Fangar from Lord of the Rings. So there's a big forest in Lord of the Rings called Fangar or whatever, and it kind of sounds similar. So I don't know if Stephen King did that intentionally, but he leaves.
Has he even read Lord of the Rings? I mean, I assume he probably has. Yeah.
I would assume so. I mean, that would be weird if he hadn't, right? I don't know. I'd have to fact check.
I feel like every big author, like fantasy type author, has had to have read.
Yeah, it's like the OG series, but
I mean, shit, I've read it.
Yes, sir. But yeah, he goes deeper into the swamp because the fairy's leading him in there, and then the fairy ditches him randomly, of course. and then Tim finds himself on the top of an actual dragon's head. So previously,
Yep.
and this is kind of interesting because the taxman was like, "There's no dragons in this area. That doesn't exist." And then he has the fairy lead him to a dragon, and then there's some description of the dragon like shooting a little bit of fire and stuff, but Tim is actually able to just get it to calm down basically by talking to it.
So I didn't think we would actually see a dragon in this story.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah. The whole scene of Tim getting guided by the fairy through the swamp and nearly getting eaten or nearly dying, all this, it sort of reminds me of Peter Pan and how he like the fairy in this story just kind of took kids from their homes and stuff and just brought them to Neverland. And it's just I don't know much about like the real or like the original story, but it just kind of gave me that vibe of just like a trickster leading people into another world that might not necessarily be the best for them. But I guess like the only difference I would think is that Peter Pan is just kind of like a brat, and then this pixie or whatever fairy is just trying to lead lead Tim to his death for the amusement of the Dark One.
Right, exactly. I didn't even think about the Peter Pan comparison, but that definitely checks. Like, that makes sense. Yeah, especially in the context of like this being like a Cinderella type story, right? Like a Once Upon a Time.
Yeah, if it's written as like a grim fairy tale, except it's probably has a lot happier ending than most of them.
True, actually, yeah, good point. It actually ends up being fairly okay. So
yeah,
which even normal Stephen King books doesn't normally end like that, but yeah.
How did you like at this point in the story? How do you like the world building aspect of it? Because I'll just end the question there. How do you kind of like the world building with like the swamp, the forest, the town?
Yeah, no, I liked it. Again, I felt like it was just a huge flex because I was just like, man, there's obviously like cliches within this story that we have discussed already, but I liked the world as it was built. I mean, it's a pretty standard like fantasy world, I feel like, for the most part. It's not anything like crazy. Really what's the interesting part about this story is like the relationship with Kels and Nell and like what he has to do to like help his mother and stuff. But what did you think of it?
Well, it's like as of so far, it's like the world building of Midworld. At least.
Oh, you're like, talking about Midworld in general.
In this story.
Oh, okay.
Well, because like I see this book, like I said, as like an actual event that happened in Midworld, because eventually they do get on like the beam of the tiger and the bird. So it's like this is like a place in Midworld, allegedly. So like how I kind of see it as a story within Midworld, it's very more diverse than I originally thought it was going to be. It's as dark as I would have hoped, or as I would have known. I knew Stephen King and his writings would get kind of dark, but I wasn't expected to be like thrown in like a swamp. For one, that kind of took me off guard. Like I expected the forest as it started, but I think it's pretty good. But like you said, as like basic fantasy kind of areas go, it's not like super out of this world unique, but it feels like it's just super unique just because, to me at least, because Stephen King is writing it. Like it's not just some normal fantasy area. It's just like it has Stephen King's very dark sense of thought being put into it, and it's very uncanny a little bit sometimes.
That is a good point. That is, I feel like it's a lot of fantasy writers. Well, like if we talk about Lord of the Rings as a comparison, like the forests and stuff are creepy and stuff, but they're not like that scary. But like, yeah, this forest and especially the swamp, the way he describes it, he really makes it scary and dark. Like how it would probably be in like real life if it was like a swamp like this existed.
Like Stephen King's version of a fantasy world is more realistic than others, and it's terrifying.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that's like kind of because Stephen King always writes more in like more reality based stories.
Yes.
So for him to like dabble into like magic like this and like fantasy type stuff, it's very refreshing from other fantasy authors.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree.
So I don't know if I even answered my own question, but there you go.
Yeah, no. No, the swamp, going from the forest to the swamp was definitely jarring, like you said, too, because I don't think they really mentioned anything about the swamp, if I remember correctly, up to this point. He kind of just goes into the swamp, and then you're like, oh, wow. Because, like, the forest is obviously, has a lot of dangers, but the swamp is, like, it feels 2 or 3 times worse. Like, it feels so much worse than the forest, the way it's described.
Yeah, because it's like we're only talked about go to this part of the forest, don't go any farther.
Yes.
But Tim already breaches that to go see the tax man, so he pushes to the dark side of the forest, and it's like, oh, so he was kind of like a borderline at the swamp when he met the tax collector. So it's like, so Tim just keeps pushing and pushing further into darkness, which is pretty interesting theme to think about. Is that through Tim's whole adventure, even like starting right now, it keeps just getting more grim and more dark as someone's like personal life would go. Is like life's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? But whenever like life's getting you down or is really hard, or you just seem like you can't get out of something, and it just keeps getting darker, if you keep pushing through, you can only hit rock bottom like once. Once you hit the bottom, the only way to go is up. And as we'll see once Tim finishes his adventure, but we're like in getting into that like symbolism part of his life is going dark, is going down the rabbit hole, and he's using his courage to fight through it by continuing to go down this path.
Yeah. He's going on the hero's journey.
Hero's journey. Amen, brother. Is that all Thor?
Something.
That's something. Alright, that was my little rant. I'll let you get through a lot of the plot.
Oh no, you're good. Yeah, I'll try to get through this here. So, where were we? Yeah, so he encounters a dragon, survives the dragon attack, and then these watchers come out. They're described as muties, which in Midworld are like the people who can't reproduce, and they're kind of like mutants. Like they just look disgusting. And these ones are described as like reptile type weird people. So one of them tries to attack him, he shoots it in the head, and then they all like basically surround him almost like a tribal thing, and they're like saying the ancient word for gunslinger. So at this point he is
Hail.
A gunslinger. Gunslinger. So
some cake, gunslinger.
They have a palaver, kind of.
That's a throwback.
Gunslinger.
Oh yes.
Yeah, so they bring a boat actually for him, and he gets on the boat. They kind of have a palaver where they try to communicate with each other. Obviously, the swamp people like don't have like an amazing level of language, but after they take him on the boat, he asks them about Merlin, and then they bring him to another part of the swamp and then give him like a disc thing, and then they drop him off. I will just talk about a really disgusting scene where one of the swamp people had like a spider bust out of their chest, crawl on, and then he like grabs it, throws it away, and then he reaches into his chest and like pulls the spider eggs out and just throws them away. It was like,
dude, like
one of the most disgusting things I've ever read.
I was like, why is that? I was like, you could have cut that out, and it would have been fine. Like you didn't need to write that, but I'm glad you did because I was truly disgusted but intrigued.
Because in this scene, he's just like trying to talk to, you know, like these primitive people, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, that happens, and I'm just like disgusted.
It's like that happens like early on in the thing. So I think it like Tim's you know, a little kid, and he's like, oh god, I'm gonna die if they don't think I'm a gunslinger. They might kill me or something. And so like Stephen King's using all this disgusting shit that they're doing to kind of reiterate that Tim might be in danger if he doesn't think of something fast, or you know, if he's not clever enough. And it turns out they could just read his mind the whole fucking time.
Yeah.
So that's why they're laughing a lot. But and they're nice, I guess. But we don't know that until like towards the end, where they know he's not a gunslinger. They give him all this stuff because they know they're gonna die. And it's just crazy. What did you overall think about these people? They're like, they could read his mind. They're nice. They're nice people, but they can't speak English or whatever they speak.
Yeah. I liked them, even though they were disgusting. And it was another one of those like small W's, you know, for him, because he's still taking a lot of L's. So I enjoyed it. And then of course you had to have that in there to like be like, oh, the gunslinger, you know, to tie it
Hail,
back.
gunslinger.
Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, so next, he gets dropped off by the swamp people. They give him a disc. He goes into the forest, and then he starts hearing a woman talking in the disc. The woman leads him out of the swamp into like a waterfall area. And you know, when he's trying to cross, I think it's a bridge. We have an anime moment, anime alert. Tentacles come out and try to attack him, and he is forced to jump through the waterfall. So he jumps through the waterfall, and then the woman in the disc is saying, hey, there's a Stark blast coming. You need to like figure out a way to protect yourself. So he's in this completely new area. There's a Stark blast coming. He encounters a tiger placed there by the taxman, and it has 2 keys on its collar. So it's in a cage, and he, you know, resolves to open the cage. There's some detail about him being afraid and everything like that, but obviously if you read that, you know that. But he gets the keys from the tiger. The tiger turns out to be fairly friendly. And yeah, just stop me if there's anything you want to talk about there, because I got some of the detail from this, but I didn't get all. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, like the gist was the person, like the woman in the fucking rod thing he has.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it's like, is this like a AI, not like a live AI? Because it's definitely not like a person.
Right.
But we think through his whole adventure that it's just some that's just computer voice that just keeps coming on and off, that type of thing. But then you get to the end, because you think Tim's just like thinking it's a real magic thing talking to him, when we know it's just like a robot or just like an automated voice.
Right.
But then it gets to a point where it's like, oh, I can't tell you this or else I'll be shut down forever, but I'll tell you anyway because you're my friend. And like all of a sudden you're just like, what? Wait a minute. I thought are you alive? Like what? This whole time I thought you were just saying shit because you were a machine, but that's weird. And what do you think about that? Just interesting.
Yeah, it kind of threw in like a little android spin there where it's like, yeah, is she alive? Is she not? And then, you know, you find out she probably is, but dies telling Tim vital information that she's not supposed to say.
Right. Do androids dream of electric sheep?
Yeah, it made me think of that book. Yeah, if you've seen the Blade Runner movies, that's what we're referring to.
But,
are you an android or are you not?
Are you an android?
I don't know if I'm a fucking android, man. I don't know.
How can you go through this whole journey and not learn anything? Like literally.
Yeah, that book it's worth a read. It's not as good as I think The Dark Tower, but it's worth a read.
Yeah, I'd say it's a classic. I'd say read it at least once. So this is the thing. The other thing. The thing. Okay. So Randall Flagg, the Dark Man, left these keys, like all this stuff for Tim. He's like, you'll get the keys around the tiger's neck unless you're too scared to, and he like signs it RL for Randall Flagg, and then I can't remember the other two initials, but I know that there's other books with the Dark Man in it, so I'm wondering do you remember what those were? I was at work and I didn't get a chance to jot it down.
Yeah, I can't remember specifically, unfortunately.
Yeah, maybe I'll look it up before the next video and maybe describe it. But that's when I knew that I was like, okay, this actually happened. But now I'm just thinking, when it must have happened like a long time ago. But how do all these names fit in? And so I'm just like, it's a lot to think about. But we get to know that like the Dark Man within this story, like later on, gives more detail about who he is. Once Tim gets the courage to open the cage with the tiger, talk to it, do all the eye drop stuff. We don't need to go through every single little detail about what he does. But Tiger's Merlin goes through that whole scene, and Merlin starts talking about like the Dark Man a little bit and how he's just like he's essential, so they can't kill him, but they can punish him. And if we go back to like the first Dark Tower book, when Roland finally catches up to him, and it takes Roland on this trippy journey through like time and space and meaning and like all this stuff, and it's like, what exactly is the Dark Man? And I'm not going to talk about anything involving the other books, because I've read The Stand, but I haven't read the other books he's in, and I don't want to spoil anything for Andrew or if anyone listening who hasn't read those books. But so far in the Dark Tower series, it's like, what exactly is... We know he's like a supernatural-ish being who can transfer from body to body, but what's his purpose? We already know he doesn't want them getting to the Dark Tower, but what's he specifically doing in this book that's similar to what he's been doing throughout the other Dark Tower books and even some of the other books he's been in, which I will be going into detail in this video for the other books. So
yeah, that's a good point.
What is he?
What is he?
What's his purpose?
Yeah, no, I mean... Go ahead, sorry.
Because so far, the Dark Man is what I see as, like, pure chaos, right? Like, fun... Yeah. Not fun chaos, like... Just kind of like a dark... Like, obviously the Dark Man, so he's, like, just, like, the negative part of your emotions, or just like the evil sinister part that keeps you down. And what is life worth living if you can't conquer the dark side of you? If there aren't bad stuff going on and everything's just neutral, then there's like, what are you competing against? Not like reality, there's dark stuff that comes at you all the time that you got to overcome. So I kind of see the Dark Man as like the embodiment of just bad stuff happening to people.
Yeah, no, I definitely can echo that. I mean, I like how Merlin kind of says, he's essential. Like, you have to have that contrast, right, between bad things that happen in your life and good things that happen in your life. And yeah, he's kind of the embodiment of all the bad things and all the like sinister things that people do. But it has to exist, unfortunately, in the world for there to be, yeah, like you said, good things. Because if there isn't any sinister things, then there is no good things, because that's how we compare them, right? You have to compare something to something else in order to identify what it's in, like what group it's in. So you have to have both to kind of balance out everything.
Yeah. Because
So,
when we look at reality, it's just there's positive and then there's negative energy or thought or whatever you want to think of. So it's like you can't live without the dark man because he's a part of reality. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you can continue going through the plots. I just kind of wanted to mention
it's
Randall Flagg.
It's a good point to always bring up the good old Randy. But so Merlin's a tiger. He gives Tim a flask of the liquid to cure his mom's blindness, and then they make another Wizard of Oz reference.
Yeah,
and Stephen King's just obsessed with that movie, I guess. And Merlin, Tim is transported back to Tree using the blanket that they protected themselves from the Stark Blast as like a magic carpet. So he gets like a magic carpet ride. So it's a pretty, pretty good ending so far. And then, we have the final showdown where we have to deal with Kels. Obviously, Kels still hasn't been dealt with. So when they go back to the house, Tim cures his mom's blindness, and Merlin actually told him to give his mom his dad's axe. And the reason for that is when he goes into the other room to find the teacher dead, Kels comes up behind him and tries to choke him out. And while he's choking him out, the mom comes up from behind, axes him in the back. But yeah, I mean, Kels obviously is a piece of shit in every way.
Mm-hmm.
But strangling a child, and then on top of that, when Stephen King's describing what he's thinking about or what he's talking about to the kid, he basically blames all the events that happened on Nell being attractive. He's because Nell is has a nice body and stuff like that. That's the reason I did all this stuff. So I'm just okay, this guy's the king of the incels.
Right, I was just about to fucking say
which
that.
is crazy. I don't know when this book was written, but I don't even know if the term incel was really coined back then. But this is absolutely what Kels is for sure.
Yeah. It's that whole
it's
I hate women because
I hate women
me attitude.
Yeah, they don't.
And I'm a nice guy. I'm a nice guy.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know why she doesn't like me. I'm a nice guy.
Yeah,
it's are
blaming women just existing for all your problems. Literally, they're just existing. They're not doing anything to you.
Yeah, doesn't sound like a man to me.
Yeah, so he's obviously a piece of shit, and finally he dies. That's how the story basically ends.
They live happily ever after.
Yeah,
and then there's this. There's so much to talk about, and not enough time.
Yeah, it's a great. It's got a good mixture, like you said. It's kind of a grim fairy tale, kind of Cinderella, Once Upon a Time. It's got to get a little bit of Peter Pan, like you talked about. It's got Merlin. It's got a lot of blends of different fantasy things, all in the most unexpected story. I thought this Wind Through the and it is obviously about Roland. We're gonna get back into the next part of the Skin Man after this, but it's this has almost nothing to do with Roland. It's in the same world, but yeah.
See, that's why I was thinking, because we haven't read the rest of the Dark Tower series, so I don't know if this story is kind of a foreshadowing to how Roland's will end, or so I was trying to look for some comparisons that I could think of, and we know that that the Dark Man, Randall Flagg, is Walter, who was having adultery with his mom.
Yeah.
So if we look at it from another angle, we could see as young boy Tim being influenced by the Dark Man when they first meet in the forest, or second time they meet in the forest, and at horseback too. I guess when he gave him the key. So it's the Dark Man is influencing Tim's actions by giving him more information or giving him tools. And so far, in the Dark Tower, with Roland, we've seen him influence Roland's actions by by using his mom, by talking bad about his dad in front of him, trying to get him to do things.
Forcing him to sacrifice Jake. Yeah.
Yeah, like stuff like that. The being in the Emerald Castle and commanding them to not go to the Dark Tower. It's like, and trying to kill them and doing a bunch of stuff. So it's like how I'm seeing the Dark Man act in this story is, I'm not going to say particularly parallel with Roland's, but there's a lot of similarities that I think shouldn't be quite ignored. But probably don't need to focus on too heavily. But we have also noticed that every friend Tim makes dies. Everyone. Well, what a coincidence. Every friend Roland makes dies.
Yeah, good point. There is a similar arc for sure. That is a good point.
But at the end, he saves his mom. Doesn't die.
Yeah, he saves his mom. I guess Merlin isn't
doesn't
die. Yet, so I don't know if that's his friend, but
2 out of 3.
2 out of 3.
Well, wait, no, the ratio 2 to 3, because in all there was 5, so 2 out of 5. 2 out of 5 ain't bad.
Hey, that's not bad for Stephen King. Pretty good job, Tim. Yeah. All things considered.
What'd you think of the use of magic in this story? Because magic is used as like, it's not very magical as in like Lord of the Rings magic or Game of Thrones type magic. It's more like how you look at things.
Yeah. It's very Stephen King way of using it, right? So, like you said, he's more realistic. A lot of his stories are very realistic, like are set in the real world. And here, again, it's more realistic, and he uses magic kind of more sparingly, and he uses it to, more like you said, to kind of illustrate the world, less to like control the world and like how it works. Because in like Lord of the Rings and stuff, like magic can control things, and Wheel of Time, obviously magic is insanely powerful, but like in this, he uses it a little bit more sparingly, but it's very like Stephen in theme with how he would use it. So I like that part of it, because it kind of allows you to focus on other things within the story, I think. And it's sometimes magic can be a cop out, right? Like sometimes magic can be a cop out for fantasy, because magic is just so, I don't even know, it's so ambiguous, right? Like it can be insanely powerful. It can do pretty much anything. I mean, you can just be like, you can just be like, oh, he can just cast an invisibility spell. So it can very much be like a cop out, but he doesn't use it that way. So
yeah, like when Stephen King uses magic, it, like you said earlier, it's very sparingly, and it's also, I'm not going to say it's realistic, because no magic is realistic. But
what are you talking about? I can fire that, bro.
Doesn't. But like his descriptions, like the way he uses magic leans toward more realism, which is his thing anyway, right? So like, for instance, when they get to like the napkin, they're like, oh, it's like a little napkin, and then you unfold it and it becomes a blanket, and you like, it can become like a tablecloth, and it's like, wow, isn't that magical that this one thing, if you unfold it, it just can become something completely different. That's pretty magical. And then he just rides on it with a feather or some bullshit. It's like, so it's like there is magic there, but there's also kind of like a deeper kind of layer to it that I feel like someone smarter could crack. But I'd had work today. I get up early. I can't think as good.
We're just two dudes,
Just two dudes.
We're two dudes.
It is very interesting the way he uses magic, and
I kind of liked
Skin Man.
I kind of liked at the end here where it's like the tablecloth unfolds and then he gets a nice little magic carpet ride because it's like a nice cap to like it being kind of a Cinderella Once Upon a Time story. So I thought it was
Yeah.
appropriate for like
Well,
what the
that
story
and
is.
like he already did the journey. So like
Yeah,
he went through uh all the dark evil spots or whatever. You get to see him jump through the waterfall, you get to see him brush by some bushes that would give him a heart attack or seizure or something. Uh and so like he goes through his journey already. Uh so when he gets to the end and he gets the answers he wants, it's kind of like in real life, right? Let's say like you're going on a personal journey. You conquered, let's say you have a drinking problem, right? You go through all the dark stuff. You conquer drinking, all right? Uh, where are you going to go to next? You're not going to walk back into your drinking problem back to stage one, after you conquered it. This is a very vague explanation. So it's kind of like I see as like Tim conquered his problem, and so the magic carpet ride just takes him straight home because the journey's already been done.
yeah,
He conquered it.
yeah. I agree. He doesn't need to go back through all the swamp and stuff. So
So do you think Tim will grow up to be a gunslinger like Merlin thinks, or do you think he'll grow up to be an axeman like his father?
yeah, I don't know. I feel like he would probably become a gunslinger at this point. Like you said, we haven't read the rest of the series. I don't know if his story is going to tie into something that happens in the rest of the series. I think it'd be really cool if it does. But if this is just a standalone thing, that's cool too. If this is just a standalone thing and it doesn't have anything to do with anything else in this series, that's fine too. Um, but
But
but yeah,
but
I think he'd become a gunslinger at this point, right?
yeah.
I don't think he can be just a fucking lumberjack after this experience.
Well, like I said, uh I feel like Tim is resembling Roland, and so at one point, Roland says something about Tim's future as an adult, and he's like, "Well, that's a story for another time. It's a completely other story." And I think like that was alluding to, yeah, like him either being a gunslinger or just doing like anything but chopping wood. But I think it also had to show like that Roland, uh, like it was like a hint towards the end of the Dark Tower, or like a foreshadowing that Stephen King was placing in here for people who either haven't finished the series or just like a good nostalgic nod to people who have read the series. Because like so like as if the Dark Tower like does get very meta, and what if like Merlin is Stephen King and Roland just like is Tim and shows up at the end to do whatever, because we still don't even know what the hell the Dark Tower is. But what if he's like trying to save Jake or save his friends, and he gets to the end of the Dark Tower, end of his journey, and the wizard ends up being Stephen King, and he like gives Roland something to go home and like save his friends, but he like fights the Dark One or something. I don't know. I haven't read the book, so this is all just speculation. So I'm
Yeah,
probably thinking into this way too deep, but
it'll be really
who
cool
knows?
to see if this ties in to other parts of the series or the end, like you said. But
Yes,
yeah.
I think it's all the questions I have. Did anything else really stick out with you?
No, nothing else really. Just it was a cool story. I was very captivated by it. I like finished it pretty quickly. Um, but I'm excited to get back to the Skin Man too, and Roland's ending to his arc in this book.
Yeah. Thanks for waiting another week for me to read this, because I know you finished it last week.
Oh no, you're good. I wouldn't have done that if I didn't, because I know we talked about maybe reading ahead on this one. I wouldn't have done that otherwise, but it was cool. So it's all good.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
anything else before I take us out here?
uh, Stephen King, you're a master at writing. You're weird as shit, and that's why I like you.
Yeah, I can understand why some people don't get down with him, but if you can get past some of the extremely dark parts of it, it is really good writing. It's very captivating.
There is one more thing.
Yeah.
I did remember. So you know, Stephen King used to like have like all the bad alcoholism and like drugs and stuff, and that's so when he wrote. I know like when he said he wrote like The Shining, how that was like that book was like a good therapeutic ish thing for him to like move on and get all up. That's kind of what reminded me with like Nell and Kel was the mother and father from The Shining.
Oh, yeah?
So I was wondering if Stephen King just got like influence from his own past, like his own past, and he's like putting that into these characters, and that's why it comes off as so real.
Oh, and it almost is like, yeah, Kels is like his alcoholism and stuff, and then Kels obviously dies in the end. And, you know,
Yeah.
him kind of getting over it. I could definitely see that too.
So, that was just, I mean, who knows? I'll never ask him that. It's way too personal.
Yeah, we'll call him. We'll call him up.
Call him.
Okay.
Yo, Steven.
What's up?
I have a important question for you.
I have a palaver. Can we have a palaver?
Can we have a palaver? So back in 4.5 of the Dark Tower page audiobook. Alright, I don't care. We can end this. I'm tired.
Alright, well, to the one or two people who listen to this, we appreciate you listening. If you have any feedback for us, feel free to leave a comment or anything like that. Feel free to give us a like. That helps the channel a lot. And we'll see you next time with the ending of this book, which I believe is Skin Man Part 2.
Yep.
Alright.
Smell you later, Raid.
See ya.